start because we feel like we own time and can control time. And so we're slowing things down just a little bit, get the coffee kicking in, get everyone kind of revved up. It's a little bit early. We do apologize, but I think a few people are coming in. We'll start probably we're just waiting for our last panelist. Mariama, she's coming. Please join us on stage. But this is really, truly Pacific. Really slow.
Yes, especially the 3 women to 1 man.
And 4 women to 1 man. He's feeling like a minority today, but he's our special guest. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Good morning, everyone. We are all gathered here at this global UN Oceans Conference, where all of our attentions is once again turning to what is our common efforts to govern what we know as the global commons. This conceptualization of ocean spaces, more generally referred to as the common heritage of mankind, was made in a submission by Representative of Malta, Ambassador Arvid Pardo, to the United Nations General Assembly in 1967. Ambassador Pardo highlighted the necessity of establishing a new international regime for the management of the ocean's resources of our planet that was to challenge the very foundations of economic thinking and international law. The principle is widely accredited as a watershed development in the evolution of international law to rectify the unequal distribution of global wealth between developed and developing nations. Today, we are here again at a crossroads, similar to that confronted by Pardo and other developing states in the 1960s and 70s, demanding yet again fundamental changes to the international political, economic, and legal order, particularly as it relates to deep sea minerals. Yesterday, many of you would have bared witness to the launch of the Global Alliance for a Moratorium on Deep Sea Mining. The first wave of excitement rippling through this conference, you could feel it. There was standing ovation and applause, with Pacific leadership at its forefront. Today, that ripple turns into a wave, a momentum with the Pacific Parliamentarian Alliance on Deep Sea Mining, a culmination of a decade of work by activists and indigenous communities, civil society organizations, faith-based leaders and organizations in the Pacific, to whom we owe a debt of gratitude for their persistence in resisting deep-sea mining activities within our territorial waters, but also in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Nisam Bulavinaka, Talofa Lava, and warm Pacific greetings to our viewers who have joined us online across the world, and particularly in the Pacific. I know the cover bowls are really being shared at this point in time with watch parties across the Pacific. Welcome. To you who have joined us here in Lisbon, so early in the morning, we had promised you good coffee. I hope we've delivered with good coffee. My name is Maureen Penjueli, and I'm the coordinator of the Pacific Network on Globalization and the co-initiator of the Pacific Blue Line Collective. But before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors of this event: the Government of Tuvalu, Development Alternatives with Women in a New Era, DAWN, and the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining. This event is also supported by WWF and the Pacific Blue Line Collective. But I need to stop talking, because joining me this morning is a formidable panel of speakers in a hybrid mode. You could say these are today's Pardos, visionary leaders from the Pacific to breathe new meaning, new interpretation to what does common responsibility and common stewardship means in a time of interconnected crisis. On that note, I'd like to welcome to the podium His Excellency Samuela Lauloni, who is the permanent representative to the UN from the government of Tuvalu. He was recently High Commissioner to New Zealand since 2015. He's held other government positions in Tuvalu. He's a graduate of the University of Otago in New Zealand. Ambassador, the podium is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Maureen, those brief introductory remarks. I'm going to deliver this statement on behalf of our Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Simon Robert Coffey, who I'm sure all of you know that he is not able to attend this meeting, unfortunately. Our most distinguished Prime Minister of Fiji, I'm sure there are others who are also joining us virtually, so I think I will stick to the statement that was prepared. Prime Minister of Fiji, Honourable Voreqe Bainimarama, Maori Party Leader, Debbie Ngarewa Parker, and Senator Sabina Perez of the Guam Legislature. The Opposition Leader and the Chair of the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining, the Honourable Ralph Rekinvanu, and the EU Greens, Marie Toussaint. Our co-sponsors and hosts of this event, Development Alternatives with Women for a New Era, Dawn, and the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining. Talofa and warm Pacific greetings to you all. It is my great pleasure to welcome you, including our viewers that have joined us online from around the world. Our Foreign Minister, the Honourable Simon Coffey, sends his deep regrets that he cannot be here with us in person to deliver this statement on behalf of our country. As many of you may be aware, on the 14th of April 2022, the Foreign Ministry of Tuvalu announced it was rescinding its sponsorship of Secular Metals Limited for the exploration of polymetallic nodules in the international sea. This is the very first unilateral termination of a state-sponsored contract in the area. The decision has sent ripples in the international community. For many, particularly from developing states, this decision may be seen to deny the economic possibilities of benefits for my country and people, the central premise for which many of our small island states are currently pursuing as their sovereign right. For Tuvalu, this decision is an expression of our common stewardship responsibility in an area considered to be the common heritage of mankind. Our common stewardship responsibility is to ensure stringent environmental protection in light of the potential harm that seabed mining could entail on ecosystems, biodiversity, fisheries, and worse still, the potential harm on the climate function that the deep ocean plays, which will be a liability borne by the sponsoring state. It is our greatest hope that this will deter mining proceeding in the deep ocean. In Tuvalu, we believe in the concepts of kaitasi and falepili, or shared ownership and being a good neighbor. Our willingness to act as responsible custodians of the ocean is part of our drive to act as good neighbors to the global community. Our concept of shared ownership underlines our belief that all countries should share in good stewardship of the ocean. These concepts undergird our culture and our approach towards the ocean as our common heritage. As Tuvaluans, we have a deep understanding of what it means to be at the forefront of climate emergency, one not of our making. As such, our multilateral engagements and positions, including international legal norms, are informed and shaped by our shared values and responsibilities as a people, which prioritizes the health and well-being of our people, environment, and the safeguard our culture in perpetuity in the face of an existential crisis. We recognize the potential cumulative impact that deep-sea mining will pose on the health of our oceans and the transboundary harm respecting no human-made boundaries. We must move beyond the often narrow interpretation of stewardship of minerals for economic-driven imperatives and prioritize the health and well-being of our oceans, not just for today, but for future generations. We stand at a precipitous moment in history which demands great political leadership to govern our oceans. It is our hope that the global community will share in our vision of common stewardship and responsibilities for our oceans and support the growing call for a pause and even for an outright ban on deep-sea mining from our people, our faith leaders, our civil society members, scientists, and a growing number of political leaders, including from our very own blue continent. With these few remarks, I welcome you all to our side event. Farafdailas.
Thank you, Ambassador Lalanui. I think it really starts to deepen this conversation on how traditional knowledge and wisdom can provide imperatives for the global world today. And I think how desperate the world is in need of that kind of wisdom today. And so with those remarks, I'd like to welcome onto this podium Honourable Debbie Ngawere Parker from Aotearoa, New Zealand. She's a member of Parliament and co-leader of the Maori Party. She's a grassroots activist, environmental campaigner, has more than decades of experience in governance, executive management, and iwi leadership. Yesterday I was listening to Debbie's intervention at the launch of the global moratorium on deep-sea mining. And what really struck me was this shared experiences of iwis, of indigenous peoples, that resonates across the world, particularly around extractives, whether it's on land or by extension this new frontier of mining. The kinds of broken promises of prosperity, harms to environments, ecologies, life-giving forces. And I wanted to ask her to really share what it means to be stewards of this great moana. One of the biggest challenges that we have today is that under modern laws, all of our territories is now limited and restricted to territorial waters today. Yesterday we were reminded by her deepness that Pacific peoples navigated and traveled this great body of water. They saw no boundaries, the kinds of artificial boundaries today. So I invite Debbie to really bring home this message about stewardship and the kinds of responsibilities in legacy making today and what it means.
Tuatahi ngā mihi ki te mana o te whenua, te mana o te moana. Thank you very much. That was like a big task there, Maureen. I just want to, so in the essence of that kōrero, I arrive here as a, first and foremost, as a granddaughter of navigators who, Turi Rongorongo and Kupe, who took us to Aotearoa, and I'm often reminded of our roles as Teina of Tuakana and how we interweaved. And I think it's really important, as you said, Maureen, to reflect on what that means to us as granddaughters of navigators who use this ocean to weave and to focus on our future, to be the best and to achieve our potential. And I guess the big challenge for us, and I do want to lay kōrero here today, and again I invite the discussions to happen outside of just us being on the stage, because I'm pretty sure that you've all arrived here with views, and I'm really welcome to having that and sharing that. I talked yesterday about our DNA and the fact that whether you want to or not, that we have in us markers, genetic DNA that tells us that this is how we must move and must think, always future focused. It's the common theme I think that we all have here is a culture, a being of collective. And when you're a being in a collective, there comes with that the responsibility, and I often say, gosh, it must be lovely growing up as an individual with only individual responsibility, not to have to worry about the next generation. That is actually the essence of the movement and the work that we do, that nothing is about me, that I still talk about my ancestors that took us to Aotearoa thousands of years ago, as if it was yesterday, and still visualise our mokopuna, our grandchildren, as if they're here in front of me today, and their grandchildren and their grandchildren. So there's a huge responsibility with that thinking. And I think if we all had that in our sight, my challenge is, will we be making the same decisions that we see come out of our policy makers, that we see come out of our legislative makers? I come from Aotearoa, a very big part of, I guess, the politics of those that are making decisions, and it's been really hard to find our political leaders. So I guess the challenge is, specifically, is how do we impress this collective being and this necessity that I have to the future generation on policymakers who last 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, who will turn up only if public pressure tells them as politicians to turn up. And I think the biggest part for us is the importance of us using the strength of our cultural genetic being and then impressing that on those that are making decisions. The Prime Minister for His Excellency for Fiji spoke yesterday about the need to have investment. Now that investment needs to be across all borders in the world, because if Aotearoa protects its ocean, it doesn't mean to say that my whanaunga, my relation next door in the Pacific, or my relation next door in Mexico, or my relation in Hawaii is going to be protected. So my challenge to us is how we use the strength of our cultural collective being and extend and push those in Western paradigms and those in Western structures that still are intent on the very cultures and ways that took a lot of our indigenuity away, that took a lot of our guardianship and protection away in the forms of colonisation. My challenge is, how do we re-indigenize ourselves in the world so that we use the beauty and the strength of our indigenuity to partner in solutions for us? And I think that is the common heritage, is that we wake up today always thinking about tomorrow's generation. I turned up here today as an example, and we were talking, we've got one uncle and 4 aunties, My aunties will be watching this, and the first thing they'll be asking is, has she done her hair right? Has she dressed accordingly? Is she saying what we would want her to say? Because that is my obligation. I can guarantee you when I get out of here, I may have said something wonderful. If my hair was in the wrong way, that is the comment that they will give me. That is essentially what it is, our responsibility in the light of climate crisis and the dangers of seabed mining. We must always impress that in the courts, and on the front lines, in our politics. And I know I can see how the world's changing. I mean, we only have to look, and we were talking about this in some of the decisions coming out of some of our major states in the world. But the reality is, we learnt in COVID, we learnt in the middle of a pandemic, it didn't matter how rich, it didn't matter how powerful you were, we were all taken to our knees in the same way. It is the spirit and the essence of love. It is the spirit of peace. It is the spirit of unity. And you only need to look at your closest Indigenous cultures to see that happens daily. So I think the responsibility is on us as stewards. And it's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege. But the obligation and the hardness of achieving that is really hard to carry if our partners beside us don't realise and don't help us. And so it is about reaching out in our common heritage to share that and to indeed look for allies like we had yesterday with our deep sea conservation alliances, with our political alliances, with our sister from France. And I think these are things that I challenge that we do in the light of climate change and the challenges coming from seabed mining, is actually to reach to our humanity, to reach to the very thing that will save us in the midst of every other crisis. And I think to do that in a way that is secure, to do that in a way that is mature, to do that in a way that respects each other's mana. And by mana, I mean your ancestral integrity, your integrity to your future generations. So that's my pearls of wisdom, I guess. My pearls of whakaaro is to share and to celebrate the absolute privilege of steward, of being kaitiaki, but also remind that it's a heavy responsibility. And I reflected on that yesterday, the years of court, the years of having to justify that this is your focus when you know that your people need more help. The years of trolling from those who don't believe in the strength of unity and who haven't enjoyed the beauty of indigenuity. So I invite you all in your own ways and in your realms and spheres of influence to use that and to share in the genetic honour that we have as protectors. And I guess I want to end with the note that we are only as good and only as happy as those most vulnerable in our communities are looked after. If we leave our most vulnerable out and we don't have a plan B, if we lose our ocean, our planets, our Pacific nations, if we have to move, we don't have a plan B, and I cannot implore this enough. In our ancestral lessons, no one has got a solution to how we reinvigorate, to how we save our ocean once it dies. So I do appeal for you as Ngāti Ruanui, as an Indigenous person from Aotearoa, but actually as an Indigenous mother from the world, and that we all see each other as world brothers and sisters in this one journey. Get rid of the boundaries, get rid of those that put us into cages, get rid of those that profile us, get rid of those that don't see what we all have to do together. So nō reira I te āhuatanga o tā tātou tupuna in the essence of my ancestors who pay their respects to your ancestors, in the spirit of the beauty of the many grandchildren that we have, to make sure that they grow in a happy and prosperous new world. In future, I impart those and welcome any questions or suggestions or answers later on, and I hope that those aunties watching are happy with my hair today. Kia ora.
from Tuvalu to Aotearoa, New Zealand. And next, I'd like to introduce a very short video message from Senator Sabina Perez from Guam. Senator Sabina is an educator, environmental advocate, and community organizer serving in the 35th and 36th Guam legislature. She is really well known and has passed a resolution relating reaffirming Guam's rights to safeguard cultural resources and to protect ocean ecosystems from environmental harm and exploitative industry interests through a moratorium on deep-sea mining to ensure the health of Guam's people. Her message is also a reminder that the Pacific is still heading into the 21st century, laboring under enduring colonization. We remain a region that has territories. Senator Perez and her message of solidarity.
So I'm truly grateful for this opportunity to provide this statement of solidarity with a sense of urgency. As we come together in this 2022 UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, it is a renewed hope and commitment that we as a global society can make the important shifts in how we engage with our environment, of which we are part, and particularly with our oceans. The Chamorro people, the indigenous people of Guam or Guahan, have developed a unique oceanic civilization for over 3,500 years. It is fundamentally impossible for Pacific people to separate ourselves from the ocean. We are guardians as well as beneficiaries. Through our ancestry, our lifeways, our songs and stories, we are deeply interconnected. The ocean is a sacred source of life and power beyond our limited human understanding. This sacred relationship is what has sustained our people through millennia. With the expansion of militarism and colonization and the advancement of modern technology combined with the relentless pursuit of profits, our sacred ocean is at risk of being pillaged and despoiled, and a sacred trust being broken. It is evident that deep-sea mining has a potential to become a fierce new form of imperialism that further threatens our political, economic, and spiritual sovereignty and cultural survivorship. The prime iron manganese crust owner, PCZ, in the Central Pacific is garnering the world's attention as it may bring economic benefit to those that seek to partake in deep-sea mining. The International Seabed Authority has approved at least 3 exploration contracts to assess the validity of this interest. The PCZ runs westward from the Hawaiian Islands to my home in the Marianas Archipelago. The currents along the tropical belt run westward, and the effects are of great concern as our way of life depends on the delicate ocean ecosystem. Scientific consensus revealed the serious risks of deep-sea mining include devastating and irreversible damage to ecosystems and habitats, biodiversity loss of many known species and others yet to be identified, giant sediment plumes traveling beyond mining sites, smothering and destroying life forms on the seafloor, wastewater plumes with the attendant risk to our already threatened fisheries, and potentially devastating oil and toxic spills from vessels. Science has also revealed that the health of our oceans is under unprecedented threat from a multitude of human-induced stressors such as overfishing, pollution, plastics, nuclear waste, biodiversity loss, and climate change with its impacts. The potential release of sequestered methane and carbon on the ocean floor due to DSM activities and the potential undermining of the ocean's climate regulation functions are particularly concerning. If Sustainable Goal 14 is to materialize, we must not only recognize and curb unsustainable practices, but also restore the sacred relationship to our ocean and earth. As one of the remaining 17 colonies on the UN list of non-self-governing territories, decolonization is one of the means to establish sustainability for our people, because a lack of political autonomy impedes our ability to preserve our natural and cultural resources, especially with the growing militarization in our region. Although decolonization is at the heart of sustainability for Chamorros, it does not end with attaining political autonomy. The work of decolonization involves questioning the culture, history, structure, and attitudes that support the persistence of colonialism in our everyday lives, locally and globally. As a member of the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining, we invite participants to stand in solidarity with all the recommendations, which include supporting an immediate moratorium on DSM to allow for further scientific research, to understand the true cost, which includes impacts to the world's largest and most stable carbon and methane sinks, and the impacts to our fisheries and fishing grounds, to support evidence-based policy making in accordance with free, prior, and informed consent, and by adopting the precautionary principle which considers and reviews evidence to determine whether or not to proceed, a call for a second wave of due diligence of human rights, a call for appropriate reforms at the ISA, a call for political leadership in the global north, and to continue to explore and pursue avenues of dialogue with Pacific governments currently in favor of DSM as a development option. Ginin inako fli'i, ginin enagwaidza, zen ginin ianimo. Let us stand in solidarity. In friendship and in safekeeping, in love and in hope, let us stand in solidarity. Tutuas Masi.
Thank you, Senator Sabina. From good neighbors to good ancestors and stewards, to responsibilities and obligations, I now move to invite Marie Toussaint and talk about cross-regional solidarity and the need for cross-regional solidarity. Marie Toussaint is an French environmental activist, a lawyer in international environmental law, initiator of the Affair of the Century campaign, and elected member of the EU Parliament since May 2019. Marie, the podium is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thanks a lot to Maureen, to the ambassador, to Debbie, to Senator Perez as well, to you. I am here today because it seems that no matter how much the earth is hurt, humanity is still led by this crazy idea of the possibility of an infinite growth in a finite world. But the laws of the economy are not above the rights of nature. And when we destruct our planet, when we destroy our ecosystems, we are also killing ourselves, the humanity. The deep sea is the next border of the exploitation, financiarization of humans that are just exploiting everything that lives on this planet. We must stop those countries and those companies before they hurt the oceans too much. And we must also save the climate, because we don't know how much CO2, greenhouse gases emissions, will come up in the air if we do exploit the oceans. And biodiversity, of course, how many species do we still have to discover? Let's discover and save them before they're already killed and this is too late. So you have to come and join us by telling the world that planetary boundaries don't have any border. And that's the reason why I am really happy to be here today and to join forces throughout the planet in order to save our planet and save our oceans. Maureen told you, I am French. I am French, and as much as I feel pride of being here today with all of you and being here yesterday as well and for the rest of the week, I also feel shame. I feel shame because I come from one of those countries. I come from continental France. I'm coming from one of those countries who will open and launch the exploitation of deep sea for mining reasons without not feeling directly the consequences. But as I told you, the planet doesn't have any border. Right now, the French government is talking about science. They're pretending that it's for scientific reasons, that we have to explore the deep sea. But that's not the case. And we can see that in the texts coming from the government, because last year they published one text talking about feasibility of deep sea mining. So we can already see that pretending to use scientific arguments is sometimes a door open for the exploitation of the ocean. In France, you know, we have former colonies that are still part of our territories, and as much as we're looking for permits in the Clipperton area, we are also looking for zones to mine in the ocean around Polynesia. Among the permits right now given all over the world, 4 companies have the most of them. Those 4 companies are Occidental and Western companies. They're not Pacific companies. They're Belgian, Canadian, and Americans. And that's also why we really need to gather forces, and we cannot let the Pacific Islands alone lead this battle that concerns all of the oceans and all of humanity. And when I hear about the previous speakers, I feel a bit jealous, I have to say, because in most of our Western and Occidental countries, we do not talk about stewardship. We do not talk about good neighborhoods. And we do not talk about the legacy of our ancestors. This is not ethics that is the rule. This is not even the law that is the rule. But this is avidity that is the rule. We have a responsibility as parliamentarians from all over the world to stop those attempts to dig into our oceans. The European Parliament, of which I'm a member, have called repeatedly for a moratorium on deep sea mining, and this is good. The European Commissioner for the Environment is asking the world to wait until we have sufficient knowledge about the impacts, possible impacts, before we do anything. We move one finger, and it's gonna raise the voice of EU on that matter. But we also know that it's not enough. There are a lot of countries in the world that are outside of the European Union. We also have to convince and mobilize the states of the European Union, because in the end, they're the ones who really decide on this issue of what we do in the common goods, in the common global commons that are the oceans. And this is why today it is an honor, as both a member of Parliamentarians for Global Action and a member of the European Parliament, to present the official launch of the Global Parliamentary Declaration calling for a moratorium on deep sea mining. Initiated together with fellow PGA member, Honorable Ralph Regenvanu from Vanuatu, who is also the chair of the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining, and my fellow French member of the European Parliament, Caroline Rose. Through this declaration, parliamentarians around the world are united in calling for a moratorium on deep sea mining. Honorable Ralph Regenvanu will be here tomorrow, and I'm sure he will work with you in order to defend this declaration. So just a little word on Parliamentarians for Global Action. If you don't know it, this is a global network or over 1,000 committed legislators from 135 countries that informs and mobilizes parliamentarians to advocate for human rights and the rule of law, democracy, human security, sustainable development, non-discrimination, and gender equality. That makes all sense also with the sponsors of the event today. This declaration says, among others, that we make the following commitments: to stand in solidarity with our colleagues from the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining and with all the people of the Pacific, a region which will be used as a testing ground if the deep seabed mining exploitation industry were to begin. To recognize the growing support from scientists, civil society organizations, companies, and some leading states for a moratorium on deep sea mining, and urge all actors from all around the world to join this call. We commit to act at national, at regional level in our respective parliaments to make this call a reality. And we commit to call on our governments to participate in the negotiations of the ISA in order to defend this moratorium, and also to ask for a reform of the ISA so that it's made democratic and opens its door to civil society. I told you today is the launch of this new alliance. We are already 57 signatories from 33 countries around the world. That might seem a lot already, but it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning because we haven't spread the word yet, so we can really enlarge, and we count on you also to spread the message, to mobilize your MEPs. And I have to say, we already have support, because the youth is already taking up this declaration, is ready to launch campaigns, to mobilize their representatives, and I want also to greet Camille Etienne, who is here in the room and will do this job in France, and I want to thank her for that. And I think a bit more than France, by the way, at European level. What we need to do right now is really to join our forces together throughout the borders in order to protect the oceans, climate, and biodiversity. We can act before it is too late. Thank you.
So the ripples grow and the momentum builds, and we now have real possibilities to really change the debate and discussions. Thank you, Marie Toussaint, for what we've been working so hard for, to build cross-regional solidarity, to recognize the disproportionate burden that Pacific communities, Pacific leaders consistently carry on this very difficult, controversial, most challenging issue of our time. I would like to now play a very short video by Honorable Ralph Reagan-Vanu, who sent a message of solidarity. Ralph Reagan-Vanu is a Vanuatu anthropologist, artist, and politician. He is a member of parliament since September 2008. He has served as a member of the Vanuatu cabinet and as the director of the Vanuatu National Cultural Council from 1995 until December 2010. If you could play that message now. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person for this important discussion. As the chair of the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining, I want to thank you all for your participation today and your ongoing and continuous efforts to raise the alarm and urge caution about the new dangerous experiment that is deep sea mining. As humans, we have mapped the entire surface of the moon and even Mars, but here on planet Earth, we have only mapped 5% of the ocean floor, making it the single largest collective unconscious of our world today. In this great unknown space, over 90% of the world's ecosystems live and thrive, having taken millions of years to form. This is our common heritage. As humans, we are also 60% water, and when we cry, our tears have the same salt percentage as the seas and ocean. A reminder that we all emerged from the ocean. So how do we as a species deal with this planetary unconsciousness? In this age of wealth and accumulation and endless growth, unfortunately, we are again approaching this with greed. Human greed is a basic tenet of the human endeavor. It fuels our imaginations and takes us to places we have never been before. Stories of mountains of gold in faraway lands fueled the first European explorers to expand their desires and empires to feed their greed. And we all know how this story ended. Populations of indigenous peoples the world over were decimated. The rich got richer and the poor got poorer, and the North became developed on the back of resources from the global South. Today we're at the edge of a great abyss, a critical juncture in human endeavor, a time of complex and interlinked crises, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the pandemic, and the economic crisis strangling our countries under the weight of debt. These interlinked crises are crises of our own making, a spectacular failure of the dominant value system that underpins our economic structures. Yet stories of mountains of gold persist, and now we witness another wave of greed to exploit the ocean floor for minerals, backed by a false narrative claiming that these minerals are necessary for a green climate transition. Our Indigenous worldviews teach us otherwise. Today, our Indigenous communities, community leaders, both men, women, and young people, some would say modern-day prophets, have warned us against the dangers of deep-sea mining Over 600 scientists have also warned us of the destruction and harm that deep-sea mining will have on the planet's unconsciousness. Living systems that took millions of years to form will be destroyed in the blink of an eye, with no recovery possible within human timescales. And mining plumes, likened to sandstorms, will travel with the currents and persist in water columns, crucially affecting fisheries, which is the economic lifeline of many of our countries. The light and sound from mining will interfere with our fellow creatures, such as whales and dolphins. Worse still, deep-sea mining will disturb the largest and most stable carbon sink we have. And in the event that mining accidentally hits a methane seep on the ocean floor, scientists warn of doomsday climatic scenarios. Early movers such as BMW, Google, and Samsung, heeding the warning of scientists, have agreed to temporarily halt sourcing minerals from the deep sea. The latest warning of note was issued by the United Nations Environment Programme earlier in June this year, and they state unequivocally that there is no foreseeable way in which the financing of deep-sea mining activities can be viewed as consistent with the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principle. Meanwhile, our political leadership grows, with Chile being the latest country calling for a 15-year moratorium. Here in the Pacific, I wish to congratulate Fiji for its leadership in being the first Pacific Island state to declare a ban on deep-sea mining within its national jurisdiction. My own position as a Vanuatu parliamentarian is to heed the united call of our citizens, calling for an outright ban on deep-sea mining in my country also. It is also the reason why I'm pleased today to be part of the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep-Sea Mining. Our key priority remains to build solidarity within the region and to link it with global networks. We aim to encourage our fellow Pacific states that have indicated an interest in pursuing deep-sea mining to stop and to join us in taking a precautionary approach as a region and as a world. I appeal to the Republic of Nauru, the Cook Islands, the Republic of Kiribati, the Kingdom of Tonga, to follow the lead of Tuvalu and to draw back from the brink. I am delighted that the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance is now working with the Parliamentarians for Global Action, the PGA, to unite our political efforts and to co-launch the Global Parliamentarian Action Group on Deep-Sea Mining. Colleagues, fellow leaders, legislators of the world, the time is now. We need your leadership to stop what could be one of humanity's final follies. I urge you all to join today to draw a blue line on deep-sea mining. Thank you.
So, because we typically took too much time having coffees and getting to know each other, we're now running out of time. But I do want to give the final word, and hopefully we can have enough time for question and answers. But I want to give the final word to Mariama Williams, who is a feminist economist with over 20 years' experience working on economic development, macroeconomic, trade, external debt and finance issues, with a focus on gender equality and women's empowerment, social equity, sustainable finance and development, and climate change issues. She is the director of the Institute of Law and Economics in Jamaica, a member of the Caribbean Feminist Action Network, the Gender and Trade Coalition, and a principal consultant with the Integrated Policy Research Institute, and senior associate with the Political Ecology and Sustainability Program of Dawn. Mariama joins us, and she's been listening intently yesterday and today, and there is still this outstanding legacy issues around economic development. I ask her and invite her to give us 5 minutes of reflections, and I know this is a big weight, to conclude the formal part, and then we would open it up, hopefully to take a few questions from the audience.
So good morning, everyone. Nice, warm Caribbean greetings to you. First, I must say I would like to say that all spiritual, indigenous, political, and legal protocols observed. With a great depth of thank you to the Pacific Islanders, to Fiji, to all the panelists, to Ambassador, to Honorable Debbie, to the parliamentarian from France, I've forgotten your name, sorry, I apologize, for really shouldering this burden. And I'm a little bit saddened that we don't have an official representative from the Caribbean, either as a parliamentarian or ambassador for this, because as small island states, we also are implicated, and will have great impact on this. I come to you to speak today as a feminist economist, but also somebody who's engaged in mindfulness, yoga psychology and yoga philosophy, and rethinking economics, and rethinking both from an heterodox perspective, from a feminist perspective, and from all of the various things that I've come across, to really address these issues, because it seems that we have approached some levels of insanity that really it seems incredible. There is no appropriate business case for deep sea mining other than pure profitability and exploitation. There is no economic case for deep sea mining other than, again, a pure predatory perspective on limitless growth and accumulation. And as we noted from the previous speaker, all of the actors who are pushing this are not living in the jurisdictions that will be inundated, that will be destroyed and decimated by the actions that they will be perpetuating. And I think that is a moral and a criminal thing that we need to keep in front of us. When they have destroyed, they will go where they need to go. The oligarchs, we talk about oligarchs and they say Russian oligarchs. We have oligarchs in the US, we have oligarchs everywhere. These are oligarchs that have no interest in people or in the well-being of civilization. And this is something we need to stop. The one thing I wanted to talk about, two things: historical responsibility. I come from climate change, so that's a very important thing. Equity, equality, CBDR. I mean, I think historical responsibility is central to this discussion, right? And historical responsibility is not a fact of history. It's about the action. Every action we take is a historical responsibility. Every action that we do leaves the imprint on the world. And as been noted in all of this speech here, that the world, we've been here before. This is not new. Gold mine, silver mine, mining of people from Africa, my descendants, we've seen that. These are not new things, yet we are back again with the first defense, our earth, and the last imperative for us, our survival, is the ocean, right? The ocean is where we came from. The ocean is what survives. Everything has been talked about where that ocean lives. And yet, we are not taking care of it. So the historical responsibility for colonialism, for imperialism, which we saw before and which one writer talks about, they have been reincarnated in the global political economy under various kinds of discussions about inequalities and various kinds of things. And we see a pullback from common but differentiated responsibility, from historical responsibility. It doesn't end. There's a positivist way to address this. It doesn't have to be a contentious. There's a positive way to address historical responsibility. We think in terms of history itself as being a responsibility, beyond objective facts, beyond prescriptions, beyond norms. It's the ethical nature of the current activity that we want to see discussed in terms of the context. We want to problematize it. Climate, of course, interlocks with all of the different issues that we're talking about. And that the promise within the climate arena was that the developed countries would actually pay for the damage that was done through providing funds for adaptation and mitigation. $100 billion, we've yet to see any of it significantly done. And that $100 billion is 1/28th, I've seen figure, of the UK's GDP. we hear that we cannot find the money for climate. But look around you at how many billions of dollars have been found in the last 6 weeks. Okay? How many billion dollars have just materialized from nowhere? And yet, we leave the peoples of the Pacific and the Caribbean who are highly indebted from a whole bunch of global political mismanagement of macroeconomics and microeconomics to make trades of desperation. Because leaders are not simply signing on to deep sea mining. They're thinking that they need to take their people who have suffered from debt and now pandemic and now the effects of war and the management of that war, which is not mindful of the rest of us in the world and what we're doing. The management of that war has a whole different agenda that certainly seeks to further dispossess and disenfranchise many of us. So we really need to look at this. And I want to juxtapose to you what we're doing in economics, right? So the IMF, International Monetary Fund, is the guardian of the monetary system. Let's say the ISA is supposed to be the guardian of the ocean. The IMF and the central banks talk about macroprudentiality. Under macroprudentiality, what they're doing is they're setting up systems and tools to assess systemic risk to the financial system, to look at what are the different factors that can destroy and overturn the financial system. I urge us today that we need to have that kind of macroprudential towards the ocean and towards the very thing, the very foundation of our life. That it's the same kind of economic-ism that has led the ISA, which should be the guardian of the ocean, to be making these choices. We have set it up, our governments have set it up so that the Secretariat benefits from the monetary issuing of these licensing. That should never have happened, but it has happened. We need to stop that. We need to have an approach, the same approach that the central bankers have and the IMF have about macroprudentiality and microprudentiality. We need to have that for our oceans and for all of the blue economy. There's no way that we should not have macroprudential type assessment. Tools exist, the monitoring exists to be able to say that this cannot be allowed. We need to rethink how we set up a secretariat that is to guide and preserve the common humanity of all of us, that its survival depends on it issuing licensing to companies that will destroy the very thing that it's supposed to preserve. Now, I'm never a defender of the IMF. I spent my career critiquing the IMF. But I think in the case of macroprudentiality and the central bankers, we do have some lessons to learn. That if we can set up mechanism to monitor, to warn, to predict about the financial system, that is man-made, that can be recreated. But we don't have such a system in place within the institutions that regulate all of what is important to us of life, then something is clearly wrong. And something is morally bankrupt and criminally at risk. And I think we need to really push hard and really bring that, and I really think the parliamentarians, the last gentleman that spoke, he covered most of the points that I want to make, but I really do want to bring that in. We need to go back to the convention, CBD, the UNFCCC convention, and all of the convention to push for loss and damage as a financial. We made a mistake, a strategic mistake in Paris in agreeing under pressure from the US, from Obama, not to keep loss and damage as linked to finance. And we need to go back and we need to fight for the WMLAD and other aspect, that third part of the WMLAD, which is not just like the SDG 14 is not being premiered, the third pillar of the WMLAD, which talks about action and support. Action and support, capacity building, technology transfer, none of those have been forthcoming. And we need to regard ourselves, both in the climate space and in this space, with all of the tools that are being utilized to protect the financial system and other aspects of this system, to make those arguments and to build this global coalition. We need a prudential approach to our oceans. We need macro-prudential approach to our oceans. I would like to have some discussion, so I'm just going to throw that out there and leave it, and we can discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. We only have 5 minutes left, and I can see my team saying that we have to wrap it up, which I'm really sorry, but I think the value of the 20 minutes that we took for coffee is still quite fundamentally important, because I think that was about establishing relationship with the current speakers that you know. So I think I would like to just wrap this up. There's another event, but I want to really thank you. I think they've given us very fundamental food for thought on very key principles, some very simple, like the ideas of what it means to be a neighborhood, what it means to be good neighbors, what it means to be good stewards, common responsibility, what it means to really recognize historical responsibilities of outstanding legacy issues, which is driving many and fueling a few of our countries to pursue this narrow path to mine our ocean floors. What it means to be in solidarity today across the world, to recognize the disproportionate burden. Europe is 16,000 kilometers away. If you drew a straight line to the Pacific Ocean, to the Clariton-Clipperton zone, it may seem far, but globalization makes us all connected. Investment is coming from the global north. We are the frontier communities that are bearing witness to a time of immense crisis and providing the kinds of wisdom, leadership, the mana that I think the world really, really needs today. And so we leave you with a challenge, promises of commitment, of solidarity, and we also invite you to the struggle and invite you to join us in drawing a blue line. It's necessary, not just for us today, but for those that are yet to be born and those that are yet to come. Thank you all for taking the time. To all of our viewers, Naka.